Hello everyone, hope you're all doing great. Have a happy new year, and as always there's a message before the video starts. If you want to skip straight to the stories, then there's timestamps in the description for that. So I hope everybody's doing great. For today I just wanted to share some advice that I found's really helped me, and that's if ever I was feeling down or having a rough day, if I focus on the tasks at hand and making sure I stay consistent, it would pay off eventually. I realised I had to ride out the daily ups and downs to get to where I wanted to be, and I recognised that it was a daily battle to stay on top of my mind, and the worse the day was, the more I viewed it as an opportunity to grow my mind and expand. One of the biggest parts of the fight is staying in the fight, and reminding yourself of that can give you a short mental break and help you find strength. It's something that really made a difference for me, and a small thing that helps is trying to stay on top of my diet and eat relatively healthily, because I find when I start eating worse food I tend to feel worse in myself and strangely almost a little bit down. I don't know, it might not work for everyone, but I think it's definitely worth a try. So I hope that can help somebody out there. And remember to only compete with yourself, because there's no point looking around at what anyone else is doing. You have to not care what anyone else on earth thinks, and you have to not care what anyone else on earth is doing. You're you, and you can only ever exist as you, and you have to be the greatest version of yourself. Other people might have had somewhat easier lives than you, and had more things go their way, but the hardships that you've had is a perfect training ground mentally to get to where you need to go. View it as that. I hope you're all doing great, and I love you, and you're not alone in your struggles. You can overcome any problem you're facing, and you're greater than your demons. So I hope you enjoyed these stories, and make sure you check out the podcast in the description below, and my Instagram at Joe the Insomniac. My family owns a lot of land, and on this land we often have problems with squatters. My dad and one of my friends and I would all go out to check out places where apparently people were staying that shouldn't be. I mean, we had more than enough private property signs, and they're just annoying, especially if they're potentially doing lawless activities on our property. So one night, we have such an event. Someone's been sleeping in one of our cabins. Yes, it's derelict, but it's ours, and apparently they look like they're crackheads. Ah, great. Not only have we got to clear it up, but we're also going to have to take out some drugs so nobody or any of our animals can get hurt on them. Unfortunately for us, we have to check it out quick, because my mum's getting really worried, and nightfall's about to set, which only makes it worse for us. We walk up there, and we're just having a laugh, saying, I hope they're not armed, because I know that we are. All of us have rifles on us, and my dad has a shotgun. If it comes to it, heck, we're going to light them up. I'm not going to take any risks, and the law's not going to be on their side if they're already breaking the law but also trespassing on our property. We get in there, and it's quiet. Just too quiet. My dad said he's going to go outside for a cigarette. I decide to join him. We're really confused because we had seen them a couple of nights ago. They must still be around here. Eventually all of us are outside. I turn my back on the cabin for 1 second and I hear a loud pitched scream. It makes me drop my cigarette. I look around and can't find the source of the sound. We all have our hands on our weapons. We now see a faint glow behind us. I suddenly have this warm feeling. I'm not one to believe in the paranormal, but it's strange. I turn round, and to my horror, the entire cabin's been set on fire. I mean, not like a normal natural fire you could start with even a match, like the whole thing had been doused in gasoline. Like somebody was waiting for us to stay in there, heard the door close, and then tried to burn us alive. We never actually found out who did this, but my god, would we have let them have it if we found them. We called the police, but unfortunately, as the cabin had burnt down, there was no evidence in there, and the case remains unsolved to this day. This is my mum's story that happened when she's about 18 years old. Back then she lived in a small town in Germany, and she would go on bike tours frequently. This particular day, she wanted to ride the bike to the forest, have a picnic there and ride back home. She had done that a bunch of times and said it wasn't an unsafe place to be, and she would always set up her stuff near the road, just in case. Anyway, when she almost got to the spot she usually goes, there's a boy fixing his bike. My mum said he's maybe 14. My mum wasn't on the bike anymore. She was wheeling it, because she was almost there. When passing the guy, he jumps her, and the next thing she knows, she's face down on the ground. She instantly starts yelling at him to get off and what are you doing? He instantly gets up. But my mum takes the opportunity to get the hell out of there. My mum didn't call the cops or anything because, well, nothing happened. This isn't all though. Fast forward 4 or 5 years on, a few towns over, this guy's on the news for murder. He would wait for women in the park, pounce on them and kill them. My mum was just glad that this happened when she was younger, because if he was older he might have been stronger and managed to get her dead in the forest. I like primitive camping, and me and my wife go out sometimes by ourselves. We usually bring the dog and spend a couple of nights. This time we invited some friends for drinking. Anyway, on the first day, we heard a vehicle coming down the road. Not odd. There are maybe 10 sites or more several miles down the road. It's a dirt road, with nothing there but these primitive sites. One way in and one way out. What's odd though, is that the vehicle that they see is a meat packing truck. It was old, really old, and the lettering was faded. It was faded in beige. None of us really made out the person driving it. There were no plates on the back either. So we all get creeped out collectively, but kind of decide it's not too weird. Maybe they're just renting it out for the cheap. Flash forward to the morning. My mum calls. She's panicking, freaking out. Apparently, some hikers were literally abducted within a few miles of us. There are several girls out at our site too, and my mum's convinced it was the people we saw. I wasn't 100% certain, so pull out my GPS. It was less than half a mile from where we were. I don't remember much of what happened after, but we got the hell out of there. When I was a kid, I grew up at a campground. I'd literally spend the whole summer there, as a relative managed it and worked night security, so I'd been camping throughout my life. On my 21st birthday, some buddies and I decided to go on a trip and do some real camping away in the bush. We Google Mapsed a nice spot near a river along the coast of Lake Superior, out of our way. It was only a few hours to boat there, and we would canoe along the beach for a few miles to get to this spot. We're talking real remote. The nearest road was 5 miles away, and other than trekking through the woods, the only way to get there would be to go back the way we come from, along the beach. So we set up camp near dark, got a nice fire going, and just drank for a few hours. So around midnight, we're all getting tired. After all the paddling and stuff, we were pretty ready to get our tents out. Now, even though I've been camping my whole life, I'm still a light sleeper. I can hear something moving around outside the tents normally. Now right now, I hear heavy footsteps. They're clearly from shoes. I assume it's not an animal, obviously, but it's just one of my friends going to use the bathroom. Even though I don't hear any zipper sounds to the tent, the steps begin to slowly fade away towards the beach. After about 20 minutes or so, I forget about them and begin to drift off to sleep. The next morning, we all get up and start making breakfast and collecting wood. The walking never comes up and we carry on. Now later in the day, we all head to the river to do some fishing and split off into groups. I'm fishing with the friend in the tent next to mine when the other guys split off. He starts saying if I heard anything last night. I tell him about the footsteps and he nods. He then tells me that about an hour after they walked off, they came back. I mention to him that it's probably someone from camp, and he tells me that he doesn't think so because they never went to a tent. He says that the steps walked past the tent, then carried on into the woods. Now jump forward to the last day of the trip. No steps are heard, all throughout the week. Until last night. We're all settled in nice and early, and we have to pack up our stuff and paddle back. And about half an hour in, I can hear steps off at the back edge of the clearing again. They're kind of faint, but as I can start to hear them more clearly, they picked up the pace until they're at full run. And they storm past all the tents into the beach again. We're talking full sprint like you're running for your life, and it's loud as hell. This time, everyone wakes up and climbs out of their tents, flashlights and everything. We all jump out, but there's literally no signs whatsoever that anybody ran here. The soil in the area is fairly soft. If it was a deer or bear, there's going to be clear footprints, but a human? That would definitely leave some. Not even the grass was disturbed. I've never seen anything like it. Being in such a remote area, I really think it must have been something paranormal. Nobody got any sleep after that. We all pack up our stuff except the chairs, and wait around the fire until the sun comes up, paranoid and ready. One of my buddies suggested it could be a Wendigo, but I don't know. Scared the life out of me. My family owned lots of swampland, and we had small cabins set up on some of these, because it could be really nice as a getaway sometimes. There's something about being out in nature which is just so relaxing and nice. All of that changed one day, however. When I was about 14, me and my best friend stayed in the cabin. We mostly played video games, and just had a good laugh. One night there was a really big thunderstorm, and we had to retreat from the cabin to get back inside. Now the next morning, my friend looked out the window and said, "Oh, I thought we were staying in the closest one to us." I said, "What are you talking about? We were." He said, "No, we couldn't have been." I looked out the window, and to my amazement, the cabin was no longer there. I then rushed downstairs to tell my dad, wondering what on earth has happened, and my mum meets me halfway up the stairs saying, "You're not going to believe what's happened. The ground that was underneath the cabin you two boys were staying in has collapsed, and the cabin's gone." To this day, it's one thing that's horrified me more than anything. The fact that we were so close to danger and didn't even know it. Heck, nobody knew it. These events took place in the spring of 2014. My friend Samantha and Tanny had finally agreed to come camping with me. The problem is that none of us were experienced in surviving the wilderness, but that didn't stop us. We packed up our gear, loaded up on food, alcohol, and made our way to our location. When we arrived at the spot Sarah had googled, we realized that we would have to hike for a while in order to find a spot suitable for camping. We hiked for some time before reaching a clearing. We set up camp and started a fire, opening a bottle of tequila. After some drinking and smoking a bit, I decided to start preparing dinner, so I left Samantha and Tanny by the fire as I was separating our dinner. As I was busy separating, I realized a man's approaching our camp. "Hey there," he said with a thick Irish accent. I was caught off guard as I wasn't expecting to see anyone, but nonetheless, he seems friendly, so I reply, "Oh, hey, I didn't even notice you. Been hiking for a while?" "Yeah, for a bit." "What you cooking there?" He gestures to me. I invited him to join us because I'm not rude, and he seems nice. So we walk over to the fire where I introduce him to the others, who seem extremely unimpressed about our new guest. After eating dinner, we kept drinking, but during this time, it was becoming very clear that our guest had really taken a liking to me. He kept trying to move closer to me and was paying little to no attention to my friends. He was only speaking and focusing on me while drinking his bottle of whiskey. That's when things took a turn and his conversations become weird, making everyone uncomfortable. But it wasn't until he leant over, grabbed the back of my neck and said, "Come on, babe, get rid of these two idiots and come into the woods with me," before I could even react. And then Tanny was already right behind him, trying her best to get him away from me, while screaming like a banshee. I can't remember what she was saying, but she was inventing her own words. It worked. He let go of my neck, took a step back, looked at Tanny, and let out the most sinister smile that I've ever seen. It was something that I can't describe. For that, he had beautiful teeth and a smile, but something about the combination of his eyes just filled me with goosebumps. Even typing this, I'm having the same reaction. He slowly starts walking away from our camp while laughing. I'm absolutely petrified, but decided to quickly tidy up before heading to my tent and hide. I was originally meant to sleep in my own tent while the other two shared, but we all went to the same one. Everything had been quiet for a while, with the exception of Tiny snoring. I was about to fall asleep when I hear twigs crunching and the sounds of footsteps fast approaching us. I lay still, holding my breath, completely immobilized by fear, until I heard my tent being opened, and Samantha let out a scream so loud that it even jolted the Irish psycho, and he jumps back a few steps. Tanny has been woken by this stage, and we're all standing outside the tent. Samantha and Tanny yelling, and I'm fumbling with my phone trying desperately to call the police. He then hits Tanny in the face. I drop everything. I yell, "Run, just run." I held Tanny's arm and don't look back. Importantly, we only have socks on, and we're running through the woods at night, with a psycho chasing us. I ran until I trip over a log, smash my chin down on the ground pretty hard, That's where all three of us stay hidden, low to the ground for a few hours, but it's pitch black. When we felt safe enough, we walk back to the campground and find everything destroyed. Both Samantha and Tanny had everything stolen of value. Weirdly though, my phone is smashed, not even stolen, making me realise how bad his intentions were. I thank my lucky stars I had no documents that could identify me. The last thing I wanted was him knowing where I lived. We don't waste any more time and ran back to our car as fast as possible, occasionally injuring ourselves on the way as we can barely see anything. We get to the car and I'm trying to start the engine, which is doing that sound it makes when it's about to die. When he sees us, he suddenly starts running out of the bushes towards us, laughing. We all scream hysterically and I floor it. God, I'm so scared. I drove like an absolute maniac until we reached the next town over, only to discover that my car's been tampered with and is leaking oil. God, it was done by that psycho. We eventually get picked up by Tanny's dad, taking us to the police station immediately. And unfortunately she broke her jaw in 2 places, and they never found him. I hate the fact that he's not been caught. For all I know, he could still be out there lurking on people, just like he did with us. I know that situation could have ended so much worse. Like I said before, the part I hate in all of this is that he smashed my phone, making sure there was no trace of him or his location. He wasn't even willing to steal the phone because he knew the police could probably track it. God, it makes me sick thinking about this. I was at the office later than normal, but not excessively late. I left at about 6 and realised I needed gas, so I stopped at the 1-2 minutes from my job. It was still light out because of the summer, which made the situation weirder. I go to the gas station, and nothing has happened there before, so I was pretty relaxed, and just tired in general from work. Now while I'm pumping gas, I see a truck pull in, which is kind of rusty, with 2 guys in the front, but perpendicular in the way it's parked, which is weird, but I just keep filling my car so I can head home. The 2 guys just look like 2 guys from the country, a bit older, like 40s or 50s, but I felt uncomfortable. The guy driving was talking softly, but I ignored him at first. I didn't realise he was even trying to speak to me. The guy then yelled at me, which catches me off guard. I think I said something along the lines of, "Can I help you?" The driver was motioning for me to come closer to talk, which I didn't because it feels off. The guy finally spoke at a normal level and said they're looking for the shortest covered bridge. The country I'm in is known for this. This wasn't too weird of a question, but it's a little hard to point out without a map. I briefly told the guys the directions from the gas station and was grabbing the receipt. This is when all of the red flags go off in my head. He, the driver, asked me to lead them there now. It was out of the way and I say hell no and get in my car. He then starts screaming at me to get in their truck. Now this really scares me. He then starts to get out of his truck. I haven't got time for this. I floor it. The truck doesn't move, so I have to back out. I was worried about them following me, and they did follow my car, but I quickly take a few random turns and manage to lose them on the highway. Oh, the whole time the passenger was staring at me too. The whole thing was weird to me, but what scared me was that they were trying to get me out in the middle of nowhere to do God knows what to me. I'm just glad I got out of there when I did. I was a little young when this happened, so I don't really remember it. So this is the story my mum has told me. When I was around 5 or 6, my family and a family of friends all went camping together in New Hampshire. Each family had a camper, and we all set up at one campsite. The campground had a playground, a lake nearby, and there was always something going on. One day, me and my friend Keisha, who was around the same age as me, were playing on our campsite as our mums talked outside the camper, keeping their eyes on us. At some point, an old man came walking by our campsite. He seemed like a normal guy according to my mum, but then he started to walk up and start a conversation with our parents. He said he owns a campsite a little way down the path, and that he has his own little playground in the backyard of his camper. He then said to me that my friends were allowed to come over any time that we wanted to play. My friend's mum was oblivious to the situation though, telling him it's a very nice gesture and we can later possibly. My mum on the other hand, who's to say the very least has experience with creeps, shut him down, told him no, go away. He walked away, and my friend's mum started asking my mum why it's such a big deal. My mum told her that there's already a playground at the campsite, and that we do not go under any circumstances. She even went around to the other campsites to warn people and stay away. Weeks pass, the camping trip is over, and everyone's home for the rest of the summer. My mum is doing things around the house when she gets a phone call from her friend from the camping trip. She's freaking out, apologizing, telling her that she'll never go against her judgments again. Turns out, she turned the news on, and there he is. Apparently he got into a local pharmacy trying to get pictures developed, and he had hundreds of pictures of children. So this actually happened today. I live in a pretty nice neighborhood, and compared to the rest of my city, my area is considered safe. Well, I thought that was true until now. Me and my 2 foster sisters were walking home from school on the route we take every day, and we reached the intersection that we cross to get to our street. It's a very long wait until we're able to cross, and we usually just jaywalk. So me and one of my friends made it across, but my one friend got stuck in the middle with this girl who looks about the same age as us. And she just got off school, not saying anything. She's not saying anything, just kept walking. Now 2 or 3 minutes later, she's coming running behind me, and by then we're at our house, and she tells us to get inside fast, but it takes forever for someone to open the door, and I'm asking her over and over again what's happening. And she just says, I think I was almost human trafficked, and at some point, the girl who was calmly walking down the street started behind us like nothing happened. When we finally got inside, she told me the girl started talking to her, and at first, my friend just thought she was being friendly when she asked what school she went to, but then the red flags began. She asked her who my other friend and I were, and where she was going, and where she lived at, and what her name was, and then she heard a car rev up their engine. She turned around to see a white van parked in a small parking lot across the street with 3 men in it, and the girl also looked, and started speaking faster, asking her if she wanted to walk home with her, and it's only down one street. Finally, the light said walk, and she took off. but that girl now knows where we live. But thankfully, my friend saw the red flags and didn't give away any information, or didn't agree to walk with her. And I know it may sound like maybe this girl was also scared, but when she walked past our house, she looked completely fine, like nothing happened. Like she was just a girl walking home from school. She didn't look at all unusual. We have yet to tell our parents what happened. I just pray I don't see that freaking van. When I was younger, my friends and my brothers would always go camping together. We weren't too old, and we didn't live too far from a big field and lake. It made great camping though, because it was away from things but not too far away from home. We had one incident, however, that is truly unbelievable, and it made us all never go camping again thereafter. So one night, we're all having a great time doing some fishing in the lake. We have our fire going, and we're just talking about random stuff when suddenly we hear a clicking sound from across the water. Now I can't pin down exactly what it was, but there was something very off about the sound. You could tell an animal wasn't making it, but we're literally the only people there. Anyway, we continue our fishing, and nights fell. What's stranger though, is the clickings persisted for well over an hour now, and that doesn't make any sense. My buddies are starting to get quite paranoid now because it seems to be getting louder. It's almost like no matter where you go, the clicking seems to follow you. I decide to investigate, and so does my brother, and we both stand up simultaneously. As we get up, we can see a figure across from us on the island in the lake. He looks freaking massive though, like at least 7 feet tall. It's so ridiculous I don't even think it's a real person. We laugh about it saying, oh yeah, the tree scared us. But then the clicking starts even louder. We can now see there's a small fire on the island too. That come out of nowhere. Nobody saw it before. That makes no sense. And then it goes out suddenly. We both scream and look at the rest of the camp, who are also gathered on the shoreline looking at what this thing is. And then, almost on cue, the second we stop screaming, it starts again for 4 seconds, then goes out again. And this illuminates a figure slightly. You can't see it well because whatever it is wearing a robe, but it's an actual thing there. The fire goes out again. We all scream and run away from there. I was so scared and worried that my mum or dad would go out to investigate with the other parents and get hurt that I didn't even tell them. Nobody did. Even 15 years on, it still haunts the life out of me to this day. The thing is, we know nobody was on the island because we could see it was clear during the daytime, and we never heard a boat go in there. It's literally the worst experience of my life. I even have goosebumps now thinking of it. When I first returned from the war, I was a power line rigger. This was on EHV lines, which are extra high voltage, the kind on top of the steel towers. Those are transitional lines, not sub-transitional like most inner city lines. So anyway, I had a job during a heavy windstorm in 2008 to go out and repair some lines near Colorado and the New Mexico border. It was great pay, since it was an emergency call out, so I agree. I met up with my crewmen and head down from the Colorado Springs area. We get there at around 9 PM and start getting to work. Windstorms are notorious for feeling lines, but not EHV or UHV lines, since they are rigged differently. When I crane up to see the broken link on the tower and inspect the damage, I remembered seeing over the tops of most trees. I observed the view for a moment and saw some nearby lights from a campfire. As soon as I saw the lights, I hear yelling coming from that area. Now it must have been about 300 yards away, but I hear a woman yelling. She kept saying, "Someone please help," over and over again. I crane down and start yelling for the guys. They heard it too, and were asking questions. This is really odd. We never see anyone out there. I told them about the campfire lights coming from the direction our trucks were facing. We jump in one of the smaller trucks, since it's a 4x4, and head down the road. We look everywhere for the light, but don't see a thing. We drove back and forth, and then back again and slowed down. We rolled down the windows and stopped the truck in the area where the light should be. We all heard moaning sounds coming from the right of our trucks, so to the north. It sounded like two people are having heart attacks, and I mean really loud. So now we're on edge. The site supervisor was calling the police now. Given the general area we're at, they told us to check to see if we feel safe. Because I have the war veteran attitude, I decided to look. Two guys came down with me, and our supervisor stayed with the truck to wait for police. Apparently, they had a station not too far, like 15 minutes or so away. I armed myself with a pickaxe, and the other guys had conduit pipes like 1 inches. We all started walking through the trees with our headlamps on, because it got really dark now. The moaning's still coming from ahead of us. We got through the trees into a small clearing. It looks empty. The moaning stopped. We check around and hear nothing. We went back to the truck, and as soon as we got there, we heard the woman yelling again, yelling the same thing. "Someone please help." It was just to the north of where we were. One of the guys yelled back saying, "Where are you?" and gets no reply. Then we hear her scream in pain, and nothing else. We're already running back north and called the police, but they've showed up. They must have seen us running north because two of them came after us. We stopped in the field area, and they stopped with us and asked what was going on. We told them. They helped us look around and saw nothing. We walked back to the truck and didn't hear anything else. They said they would hang out for us and check if anything else happened, so we get working again. The police are now parked next to each other, talking while we worked. When I craned up, I can't see any campfire lights or anything. We did the job. Took about an hour and a half until we're done. When we were packing our tools to head out, one of the cops left, and the other comes with us. He told us that just to the west, there was a small plane that crashed, and people burned to death. He said the police and paramedics got to the scene, and the fire's still going. He told us about how 2 bodies were found away from the plane, crawling away from it, and one of the bodies is still there somewhere buried from the 70s or 80s. Yeah, we packed up fast and got the hell out of there. Now I never saw a fire, just light on the trees. Now I can't tell you how creepy that stuff is to find out afterwards, and the voices and moans were so clear. I always kind of believed in the afterlife after this, but God, did it mess my head up. I'm so glad other people were there to experience it though. The cop believed us too, but didn't hear anything about reports of a fire or anything else in the area afterwards. Back when I was a Boy Scout, I took a weekend-long training course called National Youth Leadership Training. One of the last parts of the course was an overnight hike into the woods, with no guide, to find our designated campsite and see how we would work under stress. We finally got to our campsite and began to unpack. We each bought a tent, but half of us left ours behind to lighten the load and buddied up. Lo and behold, my buddy brought a one-man tent only. Either I slept outside or things are going to be really cramped and I didn't want that. The sky was clear and I slept under the stars. The next morning, 4 of the other guys claimed that they saw a coyote walk up to me, sniff my face, stare at me, and leave. They were too scared to go and make it leave. They stuck to their guns though, but I didn't believe them. 4 years later, I was working at the camp as a staff member, and I'm speaking to a senior there, and apparently he said coyotes are pretty common there, and they often boldly show up. It made me realise what the guys were saying wasn't a lie. I just can't believe they let me sleep with a coyote literally at my face. God knows what would have happened if I'd woken up. I went camping with some friends near Lochmond in Scotland. We set up camp about 3 miles into the woods near a small river and got the fire going to cook some food we brought with us. The site is very remote, but in the evening a couple of guys hiked through and stopped to chat with us. They're from Poland and seem friendly enough, but ask a lot of questions about our group, how many we were, etc. And I'm a bit suspicious, but I put it down to being from different cultures. It's around 10 PM. I start to feel very ill, and I'm thinking, is it possibly from food poisoning? Now, I'm very confused about this because I'm sure the food was cooked correctly. My friends are all pretty drunk, and I had drunk about 4 or 5 cans of Budweiser. Stupidly, I packed my bag after throwing up hard for 15 minutes and decided to hike back to the main road, watching light fading in the distance. I'm about a mile into the hike back. At this point, I've been sick twice and am completely sobered up by throwing up so much. I've got sports bottles full of water. I now stop to rinse my mouth out. At this point, it's near pitch black, so I got into my bag to get out my torch, small knife and my .22 air gun. As I start zipping my bag back up, I hear twig snap nearby and assume it's a rabbit or fox. I shine my torch, but there's nothing. This doesn't make sense because surely I'm at least going to see reflective eyes, but oh well. 5 minutes later, I hear what sounds like running, maybe 100 yards behind me, and lots of twigs snapping. I turn around and assume it's my friend, and I say, "Are you kidding me?" I said I knew someone's there, and I'm not joking. I see movement through the trees probably 80 feet away. Whatever this is big. I mean 6 or 7 feet tall and completely black. At this point, my sickness is gone, and my heart's beating through my chest. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I get this feeling that I can only describe as feeling almost dizzy at the surreal position that I found myself in. I take off my rucksack and hang it up. I kill my torch. I still think it's my friends, but I have this horrible feeling. It was too big. I've got my knife though in my jacket pocket, and my pistol gripped harder than I can possibly ever do normally. I walk in the darkness for about 100 yards and stop dead behind a tree and wait. I'm trying my hardest to control my breathing, but it's supremely difficult now. Sure enough, I hear movement again. Very difficult to pinpoint, but it's getting closer. Now I'm caught in two minds, to continue to hide or confront. I decide the latter, and now I burst out from the brush. I'm in two minds, but I have to run now. I point my torch in the general direction of the sound, and there's branches moving. I start moving away from the area like an SAS trooper. I hear distance movement again. Lots of twigs breaking now, from heavy footprints. I don't see anyone now, but I know I'll shoot them. Silence now. I wait a few minutes and head back for my backpack. It's not hanging over the branch anymore. It's on the ground. That's the scariest part for me. Whatever I've been chasing could have never beaten me back to my bag. So something or someone else moved it. The branch is intact, which doesn't make sense either. At this point, I travel out onto the main road pretty sharp with no incident. I call my fiancée, who quickly picks me up, and I'm violently sick. I believe it's from fear. I tell her about what happened and she's freaking out. To this day, I still don't know exactly what happened. I do know I was terrified, and I've never experienced anything like it before or since. I've had a truly weird encounter before. I lived in Southern California at the time, up in the San Gabriel Mountains, a couple of hours east of LA. I know when people think of Cali, they all seem to think of the beaches, but I assure you, the land here is very diverse. My hometown is super tiny and has a fairly popular ski resort on the western side of town. If you take the only highway out past the ski resort for several miles, there's literally nothing but forest. And a very old gold mine is actually still there, and it's kind of cool. After those things, there's nothing but national forest. And then, one insanely isolated, very old restaurant that still functions, and then back to the forest for a long time. Anyway, just setting the scene. I was about 10 or 11 when this happened. It's almost Christmas. It snowed heavily, and the snow's still falling on the evening of this happening. My stepdad decided that we would cut down our own Christmas tree this year, so we get into my mum's big Dodge truck and headed off to the mine, which is a couple of miles past the ski resort. We got to the base of the road and were talking and laughing, etc. My stepdad was driving pretty slow since it was snowing decently. They had ploughed part of this road recently too, and there were big snow berms on either side of us, down near up to the top of the truck, probably 8 feet off the ground. So it's just barely getting dark now. Not quite dark, but twilight, I guess. So not dark enough that we can't see anything, but dark enough that the headlights of the truck are on. Quite suddenly, from over on my side, there comes a huge dark shape that arches over the top of the snow berm. It lands in the middle of the road fairly gracefully almost. My stepdad slams on the brakes. I am too stunned to speak or even scream, because there crouching in the middle of the road is some creature. It has a long muzzle and pointy ears, covered in fur. Now, I have really never seen anything like it. This all happens in seconds. The thing jumps down and crouches, glancing at us. My stepdad slams on the brakes, and then it just vaulted up and over the beam and disappeared. It must have been 6 or 7 feet tall. I've never seen anything quite like it. My stepdad refused to talk about it when I asked, terrified. If he had seen the same thing too, I knew he did because how quick he braked, and he was wide-eyed and white for the rest of the journey. I never did bring it up again because we hadn't had the best relationship since then, but sometimes I wish I could know what actually happened then. It still shakes me to my very core, even to this day. I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in northeast Georgia. It's a beautiful area with hundreds of miles of national forest, some great state parks, and tons of fantastic camping places. Unfortunately, my hometown is also relatively poor. Or there are some out-of-town residents from Atlanta and other places. A lot of the people from where I am are really poor. I do freelance work as a technical writer, so I do a lot of work online. If I didn't have that going for me, I'd have to move somewhere else. It's just one of them small towns that will rob you of your ability to accomplish anything in life if you stay there for too long. No opportunities or chances for the people that fairly deserve it. And nothing for miles around, like honestly, you're trapped there. I hated it. To the east of my town, there's a massive national forest. It's loaded with great camping sites and lots of relatively unused hiking trails. I really enjoy hiking on them with my dog, but it can be a bit of an unnerving experience sometimes. It's about a 10-mile drive from town, and there's no cell phone service for miles or houses. In the past, there's been a lot of vehicle break-ins on the trailheads. I mean, literally, the gravel there is littered with bits of broken glass from what I can only assume is break-ins. Sometimes, there's really shifty people hanging around those trailheads or just driving around out on the forest roads. There are really rough roads, and you'll see these beat-up $500 cars barreling along them that are meant for a 4x4. Some of the people you see in the cars look like the guy that got crushed by an ATM in Breaking Bad. All that said, it's still a great place to camp. However, you have to be careful. A few years ago, 2 friends of mine and I decided to play paintball in the national forest. We decided to turn the paintball expedition into a camping trip, so we can play the next morning also. After a pretty uneventful day of shooting paintballs at each other, we drive a couple of miles to one of the most popular camping spots. Sadly, a church group or something had taken up all the spots. This really got us annoyed. This was really the only camping spot that we're familiar with, and it's getting late. We decide to keep on looking, so we drive for about an hour further into the woods. By now, it's getting dark, and we're getting worried about finding a spot. We all had GPS on our smartphones, but no service of course. We turn off onto an unfamiliar road that isn't in very good shape. In fact, it looks like the Forest Service rangers used a backhoe to block off the road with a mound of dirt. A broken metal barrier lay in the woods nearby. That being said, it looked like a 4x4 had been going over the mound, so it's worn now. Our F-150 had pretty high clearance, so we decided to go over it. Now, there was an old gravel road on the other side, and the road was pretty much clear of debris. We drove for a few miles down the road, coming across an opening next to a creek. There were some blue traps hanging over a plywood nailed to a tree. That's odd. That said, it was pretty much dark now, and we didn't want to keep driving around all night looking for a camping spot. We left the truck light running and we set up in the tent. After we set up, I start noticing there's a lot of trash in the woods. I see a green bottle on the ground. I took a look at the label and see that it's a bottle of some home and garden insecticide. I was really tired now and thought someone was dumping some garbage here. None of us thought it was weird that someone would be dumping garbage here when we're more than an hour away from the nearest home. We set up camp, have some beers and made chili from scratch. By this time, it's probably 11 PM and we're eating. We noticed a faint glow from the other side of a nearby hill. At first, we thought it was moonlight filtering its way through the trees. However, the angles don't make sense. It seemed like it was far too bright and wasn't moving. It's a kind of glow you see over a big bright city, and we don't see the light source itself. Since there were no other access roads in the area, we decided to not campers. The hill was about a quarter of a mile from our campsite, and we investigate. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have done it. However, we had a few rum and cokes in our stomachs, and two of us decide to look. My other friend decides to stay. He's gonna do some popcorn on the fire. So we start walking towards the light source, and the situation gets stranger. All the trees in the area have their bark knocked off in a circle around their trunks. It could have been beavers, but why would they go all the way around a tree in a perfect circle? We start talking about the ghost in pretty loud voices, probably due to our drunkenness. As we're almost to the top, my friend falls and yells out. A few seconds later, the light goes out. We look at each other and decide that maybe we don't need to see what it is after all. Walking back in silence and keep on looking back every few seconds, we decide to turn off our flashlights and return to the campsite with the moonlight guiding us. We get a couple of 100 feet from the campsite. I can see my other friend Isaac walking around. He's wearing a hooded coat that I've never seen him wear before. For some reason, he has a paintball gun. That seems odd. We look at each other. The fire's dying down. We don't see the campsite well. Now, we've been gone for an hour. From the distance, it appears as though my friend is looking for something. He kept walking around the site and peering in. When we're almost back to the campsite, we see our friend walk up the road we came from. We figure he's went to the bathroom and didn't want to wander through the woods like us. When we got back, we sat next to our fire waiting for him to return. All of a sudden, we see him lurch out of the tent and vomits. After we left, he had a few more drinks apparently. We ask him why he's wandering around with the paintball gun, and he gets a strange face and says, "They're locked in the cab of the truck." "Did you unlock it?" "No." We go to the truck and enter the door code and see our paintball equipment just as we left it before. The keys to the truck are hidden underneath a magnetic fob. I get a sinking feeling. What were you doing after we left? I watched a movie then fell asleep. But wait, you were walking around with a paintball gun, right? Did you just change jackets? He said he'd been in the tent the whole time, wearing the same unhooded fleece. Someone had been walking around our campsite, and it wasn't him. At this point, of course, we're all too drunk to drive, but we decide to go ahead and pack up and go back to my house for the night. we don't bother packing up the tent. We just fold it with the sleeping bags and think, heck, jumping in the F-150. When we get up to the dirt hump, we see something grey blocking our path. The metal barrier that's been laying in the woods is now erect. By this point, we've all sobered up. No one wants to get out of the car to try and move the barrier. I had a metal guard on the front of my truck, so I slowly tap it. It falls over, and we drive very slowly over it, terrified we're gonna pop one of the tires and be stranded. It didn't. As we drive down the road, we see a vehicle following us with its lights off. It's probably 1,000 feet behind us, but we keep catching glimpses of it on the moonlight. I now begin to drive as quick as I possibly can. The vehicle keeps pace. It doesn't get any closer though. It just stays 1 or 2 turns behind us, but always follows. After 45 minutes of speeding, we get back to the main paved road. I start to drive everyone back to my home and decide to go a different way. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. Rural camping can be very dangerous, and we've never went back there since. I was watching my daughter's kids while she and her husband got out of town. They have a teenage daughter. Let's say her name is Alessa. At like 3 AM, I'm awoken by a weird rustling sound and look out the window and see movement. I saw a boy emerge from the bushes on the side of the house. I saw a bike tossed onto the lawn that wasn't ours. My first thought was that it's a robber checking out houses, but since he looked so young and came through on a bike, I figured scaring him straight would be enough for him to decide whether to go home or not. I didn't want to ruin a teenager's chance of life by calling the cops straight away, so I went out to the porch, flipped the lights on and said, "Hey, can I help you?" The guy appears surprised and nervous, wearing a Letterman-style jacket, but once I got a clear view of him in the streetlights, he seems much older than I thought he was initially. He walked up closer to the house and said, "Yeah, I'm looking for Alessa." I gave him a disapproving glare, hoping he'd realise he came looking for a girl late at night to a grumpy old person. I'm thinking what must have happened is Alessa knew her parents were going out of town and she might have a secret boyfriend or something. It was late and I was alone with several kids, so I don't want him coming any closer to the home. Also, I thought it was weird he comes so late. To be sure, Alessa actually wanted to talk to him. I said, "I'm sorry, who?" And he said Alessa, but he messes up the last part of her name. I said, "You wait there." He started to walk up, but I got this sick burning feeling in my gut. Instinct kicked in. I "Oh no, stop, freeze." Then said, "You stay right there. This is private property. You don't come any closer, just wait." So I go in. Alessa is asleep in one room over from where the rustling first occurred. I wake her up and say something to the effect of, "I really don't know what the big deal was to have friends over at this time of night, but you have to tell them to go home." She says she has no clue what I'm talking about. I said, "There's a guy outside asking for you." Confused, she gets up and goes to the window, sees him and goes white as a ghost. He asks for me? Yeah, by name. Call the police. I've never seen him in my life. I call 911 immediately, but when I'm on the phone to them, Alessa started tugging at my arm saying he's coming up. I had younger kids in the house to think about, so I kept the door latched and pulled it open enough to yell at him saying, "I asked my husband and none of them know you, and I'm calling 911. He got angry and started yelling for her to come out. Thankfully the police come pretty quickly, and when he heard the sirens he bolted out of there. The police followed him but didn't find him, They advised us to take her off all social media where her account wasn't private, and if it is public, make it private, and then buy a heavy duty lock, and she slept in my room for the remainder of her parents being away. When I was 7 or 8, my family went to a beach and rented a room. We had the kind of rooms where you had to rent out both, and they connect through a door. Like, there's the doors to leave the room, and doors to the other room. In the room connected to ours, there's this army family, military dad, some kids and a wife. My older sister was supposed to be watching me, as we were down at the jacuzzi in the evening. As we're playing and hanging out, having a good time, I didn't get out much, was naive and all around a kid. We're both white-skinned, blue eyes and blonde hair. This mum literally sits in the jacuzzi with us. She starts talking to us and is just making herself comfortable. I was very naive as a kid. Eventually, we start taking books, and she starts talking about her kids. Eventually, we start talking about books, and she starts to talk about her kids, and we're just having a good conversation. Really in depth, I felt. My sister decides she wants to go back to the room, but I don't. I want to stay and talk. So my sister goes back to the room. Now it's just 7-year-old me and some 40-year-old woman. It should have set off alarm bells, but not to me. So she starts talking about going and walking on the beach. It's 10 PM. She wants to go on the beach for a walk and get shells. I thought it was a great idea. I'd get to walk out on the beach at night. I felt so free and like a big kid. I didn't need my sister or anything, so I ran back to the room to tell my grandparents that I'm walking on the beach with Sue, or whatever her name was. I remember my grandmother reading her book, barely listening to me. She just stood off. So I start walking down the creepy motel corridor. So I'm going through the stairwell, which feels like it's out of a movie. Too bad I've never seen it. So I'm walking through the stairwell. The mum's way at the bottom telling me hurry up. While walking through the stairs, Army Dad comes running out saying, "Hey, I learnt about you. Your mum is calling you. It's really important, we gotta go." Basically grabbing me by the wrist, leading me out of the room. He knocks on the door and explains what happened. I never thought much of it until about a year ago. This woman was leading me alone to the beach at night. This army guy had a terrible feeling and intervened. This didn't happen to me, but my father. He joined the Navy somewhere around 80 and 84. He's told me many stories over the years, but this one sticks out in my mind the most as it's his first time at sea on a submarine. He recently got promoted and opted to become a submariner because of the exclusivity of the position. Less crew, usually only room for 1 or 2 people in your Pacific trade. Basically, you have to do the best to get on the sub. Anyway, he's on his first night out on the submarine. Everyone's asleep on their bunks. If you haven't seen them, they're usually stacked 3 high and in line on the side of the hull in a hallway formation. My dad got in one, and it's at the very back. However, he wakes up at 2 AM to alarms and lights going off. Everyone's rushing out of their bunks and out to the hatch into the next section. My dad being the last one to wake up, last out of the bunks. Ended up to the latch too late. It closed, sealed, and locked in front of him with someone shouting on the other side, "Mike, find the leak." Apparently, a leak sprung somewhere around the bunks. It either had to be fixed or that section of the submarine would have to stay sealed in order to prevent the rest of the submarine sinking, and hence him drowning. Eventually he found it, sealed it, and the hatch was opened. He has lots of other stories, but this one scared him the most. I'm an 18-year-old female student, and from where I'm from, July is an exam period, so I have to drag my backpack around during that time. Anyway, it's 7 AM, and my exam wasn't going to start until 9, so I decided to call Uber and get there early because I live at least 1 hour away from the exam centre. The car arrives on time, and I go in. Now, I'm not the kind of person to judge someone with a first glance, but for some reason, the driver made me feel really uneasy. He was in his mid-40s, had dark circles around his eyes, and was smirking a lot. He was silent for a good 10 minutes, but he starts asking questions. He says if I'm a student, and I don't want to answer, thinking that he'll try to hit on me, so I just lie and say that I'm a proctor, hoping he would back off, and God was I wrong. He starts to smirk and tell me he would always cheat on his exams, and that I was a mean person in a joking way for ruining people's lives. I don't know why I did this, but I chuckled at this comment, and it triggered him to thinking that I liked him. My bad. He then started to get personal, asking me how old I was, and if I would let my kid cheat. I lied and said I was 34, and that I have a 16-year-old kid. I was hoping this would drive him off, since I was old and had a kid, but he got creepier. He then told me I looked like a strict parent, and started saying weird stuff. He then said to me if my husband was strict like that, and started saying, "Oh, is he in your life or not?" And even thinking I have a husband, he still doesn't shut up. Now, I noticed he's moved to a completely different region from where I should be able to take my exam, going in literally the wrong direction. I start to panic, but was afraid he would do something if I confronted him, since we're in the middle of a rural area. So I decide to fake a phone call from my co-worker, pretending to talk to her, and tell her that I'm in an Uber and I'll be there soon. And I'm kidding you not, he literally immediately turns a car around, going to the direction we came from. He continued making horrible comments, and I swear this turns my blood cold. As we approached the centre, he told me that I should catch someone cheating, come back with him, let him drive them so he can make extra money, and after that he would take me to my address. The creepy part is that he had studied it by heart. Legit corpse, number. He was looking me into the eyes. Said, "I know where you live." I still remember the mark he drove, a blue Nissan. If I ever Uber again and get stuck with a blue Nissan, I will cancel it no matter what. I didn't call the company because I'm afraid he knows my address. I just hate that this happened. My family loves travelling, like all the time, so about a year ago, my family took a trip to France. At this time, I'm a 9th grader and in high school. Before the trip, my mum spent a few months learning French. My sisters have some basic knowledge of the language, so we're set. So we flew into some country in Europe, I forget which, and took the train all the way to Paris. Once we arrived in the train station, we took a few minutes to prepare ourselves before heading out and looking for a taxi. We were walking when suddenly, a guy comes up to us. He knew some English, and said, "Are we looking for a taxi?" Since he had a large van taxi, my family was happy since family, and there isn't enough seats in normal taxis, so we agreed. We walk over to him and he points out to a large black van with another guy sitting in the driver's seat. Now, I know, thinking of it, there is no reason for two taxi drivers to be in a car. The weird part was that it had no taxi indicators or anything showing what it actually was. I remember my parents exchanging glances at each other, but going along with it. At this point, we haven't even discussed prices or anything, even where we're heading. He just opened the rather large trunk and started chucking our bags inside there. At this point, my mum was worried. She demanded an answer on why there were no taxi indicators. The man started switching English and French and wasn't given a clear answer. She didn't push it. My mum asked for a price. It was a bit costly, but there's no other regular vans around. At this point, the man's getting to our lack of language and noticed my dad's attitude change. He seems more concerned. He went up to the man, stopped him at putting the last piece of luggage into the van and said, "Show me your taxi license." At this time, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a taxi license, and I guess he didn't either. His eyes widened and he seems nervous. In broken English he says, right, taxi license, and pretended to pack his pocket and act like he left it at home. My parents at this point grabbed our luggage, said thank you, we don't need one now, and quickly took us across the street where we merged with a large group of people. We see the van suddenly speed off. We eventually found a taxi terminal and a large van. We never spoke of the event again. But I know we were so close to being kidnapped, it horrifies me. My husband and I love to go driving. We prefer road trips, but on the weekends or nights, we have nothing better to do than to go around cruising and just drive around. We prefer smooth and not busy roads. On this particular night, we are bored and decide to go cruising. We went up north to a small town, about half an hour from the city where the roads are curvy and smooth. This town is close to the mountains, and if you follow this particular path to the main street all the way up north, it starts driving up a mountain. It's about 9 PM, and there are very few cars in the road already since it's a little cute town. But we kept going north anyway from the houses and stores, and eventually to where the roads start curving uphill. We drive up for about 15 minutes more, and it's pitch black when we see some blinking lights. As we get closer, we see a truck that's on the side of the road facing us. I'm getting the chills thinking about being all the way up there in the middle of nowhere, and a stranded truck on the side of the road appears. As we slowly approach, I tell my husband it's probably best to turn back. I have a bad feeling, but at this point, we're pretty much at the truck. He pulls up next to us. We see that there's a young blonde guy, probably in his late 20s, who gets up to our window. I get such a bad vibe by this and tell my husband not to put his window down. I think he also gets a weird vibe and actually listens to me. He kinda just loudly asks what's wrong, and the guy just says something happened to his truck and he needs a hand. His phone is dead. Now my husband asks what happened, but this guy insists on showing him and to take a look. He says it's very friendly and even calls him bro, and he's glad we pulled up. My husband says, you know what, I won't be much help because I know nothing about cars, but I can call help for you. My friend knows a lot about cars. The guy's insisting and gets upset. I'm now looking back at the truck, and I thought I caught movement inside the truck. I tell my husband I think we should go. Now, he probably saw the look of fear on my face because he puts the car in reverse, but as he did, the The guy is now behind our car, so my husband decides to go forward instead. We drive up for maybe 2 minutes, trying to find a place to turn around since the road is so narrow. The road turns to a dirt road, and there's a little more space on the side, so he's able to turn the car around. I am dreading going back that way now, and our phones have no signal at all. In my mind, I know this could all be someone with genuine problems, but this doesn't make sense. I cannot help the feeling in my gut. We soon reach the area where the truck had been, and there's no truck at all. We drive maybe another 5 minutes, no trace of one whatsoever, and we're sure we've passed the place that he said. We didn't drive up too far to begin with. I am both relieved and terrified that the truck's no longer there though. If it had really broke down, how did it get help working again in such a short amount of time? Calming myself down, I'm telling my husband, hey, maybe they really did get it to work. Maybe it turned on all of a sudden and they drove off. Suspicious, yeah, but not impossible. As we keep driving through, the roads begin to straighten out. We notice far off the truck with all the lights off, and park to the side again and notice movement in the truck. I say out loud, why did they turn out all the lights? I think they were thinking we're still far enough away from them, but we see 2 figures get on the other side of the truck and crouch down as if hiding. We get closer and my husband floors it. As we drive past, the 2 men get up. One of them is the guy that we had spoken to earlier, and the other's massive. With a very surprised look in their faces, one of them turns and runs behind us trying to catch us. I kept looking back, but it's so dark. Now all of a sudden, I see the headlights in their truck, and they start driving in our direction very fast. My husband keeps going, and eventually, we lose the headlights. I kept looking back the rest of the way, so scared that they're somehow still following us. Maybe they turned off their lights again and I can't see them. Anyway, after driving for a very long time back to the city, we're convinced no one's following us now. We do call the non-emergency line given a description, but we don't get the plates, so it's pretty much futile doing so, just given a description of the guys we saw. I realise all this could be rationalised, but it makes no sense why one guy was hiding and how they tried desperately to follow us. I hate the fact that they're still out there. I just pray we never encounter them again. I don't know if this is an Eastern Coast thing, but in my little town, there's a twice the ice station. Basically, you fill up water jugs and get ice bags for cheaper than you can in the grocery store. I went out a few nights ago to get some water, because hey, who wants to be drinking tap water? My husband was home, and because I'm kind of heavily pregnant, he insisted that he go instead, but I really wish that he would have done. I was out at 1 AM, and it's dark for miles in the middle of nowhere. As I get out of my car, I open the back seat to get the gallon jugs and close the door. The moment I do, a dark blue truck van pulls up behind me. I presume that they're doing the same thing as me, and I don't really think too much of it. However, alarm bells start going off, and the alarm bells start screaming at me when the slide door opens up and 2 large men step out. It's about a 20-foot distance between me and them, so the first thing I do is pull out my phone and start making a pretend phone call saying, "Yeah, I'm almost home." As soon as they see me answer, one guy says crap, and they both get in there, tires literally screeching as they bolt out of there. I throw the jugs into my car, empty, and lock all the doors a million times before I broke down calling my husband. He told me to write down the make and model of the car and colour, and we'd go to the police station first thing tomorrow. Now I don't know if they targeted me because I was a woman alone in the middle of nowhere, but deep down, I know they targeted me because I was pregnant, and I don't want to think what would have happened if they got me. When I was 16, some friends and I went to an outdoor centre concert thing. We parked to the mall and took a shuttle to the venue. For perspective, the mall is a 20-minute drive from our home, and the venue's another 20 minutes away in a different direction. During the concert, I end up losing my friends in the crowd. I don't care though, as I wanted to get to the front, and I could just call them after the concert ends. Well, of course I lost my phone somewhere in the crowd of people, and don't even notice until the last show wraps up. I search the ground as the people dissipate with no luck. Reluctantly, I just hop on the bus heading back to the mall, hoping to meet them at the car. The car is gone, and I start to freak out a little, but it's 10 PM when I head to the bus station to see when the next bus is coming. Just my luck, it's a special holiday, so no buses until 10 AM. I borrow a stranger's phone and call the two numbers I know, my mum and brother. My mum doesn't answer, but my brother does. He basically gives me the suck it up talk and hangs up. So I'm alone, scared, and a little drunk in a city I don't know. I try walking but quickly give up when I realise I'm basically walking down a random highway towards God knows where. Back at the station, I'm just staring at the map when a stranger creeps up behind me. He asks me where I'm heading and I say the truth. He is conveniently going to the same city, asking if I take a split to a cab. Realising this is my only option, as I said I don't have my own money, we get in the car. Turns out he has less than I do. We barely have enough to get to the heart of the city, which is a 10-minute drive from my home, but at least I know my way from there. During the drive, this guy gets progressively more creepy. He's aware that I'm 16 and he's 25. He scoots closer every minute, touching me, insisting I come back with him, even writing his number on my leg. As we get there, I realise the situation I'm in. We're about to get out at a quiet area at 2 AM and the cabbie's going to drive off, leaving no one to hear me scream. The second he gets out, I turn to the driver begging him to take me further, so I can at least put some distance between us. The cab driver said he hadn't heard a word the whole way, but definitely heard something odd. He asked me for my address and takes me all the way home, and the creeper stares in frustration as he drives off. When I got home, I offered to wake up my mum to pay him, but he declined, saying he's just glad I'm safe. I broke him through the kitchen window to get to bed and cried myself to sleep. I'm just glad the cab driver was so kind to me. I really enjoy going camping. I'm truly an outdoorsy kind of person. It's very rare that I ever have a bad experience while camping, but I did have one that stood out to me, and is one that I can't explain. So let me start off by saying this was a good few years ago, and everything seemed normal on the day. In fact, I was having a really good day, so I arrived for my 4-day planned hike and camp in the evening. I had a really easy to set up tent, so it didn't really matter what time I got there. No, I wanted to sleep on the first day, because I was tired from driving. So I park my car up, and I realise I'm the only person in the parking area. I get out and hear some voices, but they immediately stop when I get outside. I look and realise that I've accidentally left the radio on, so I just turn it off, get my camping gear out and head out. Now everything feels normal. The sun's setting, so I can still see where I'm going, and honestly, the forest and area that I'm in looks truly beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, it's probably the nicest sunset I've ever seen. There was sort of a mist above the trees. I took a couple photos on my phone and I was really glad I did. I actually still use one as a screensaver, but that's not the point. I find this beautiful spot that I've been to before. It's close to a lake. I set up my camp and equipment, and what's better to do than some night fishing? So I head off towards that. I have an inflatable raft that I can use for my fishing. I have a small Bluetooth speaker with me, and set that down and set off. I'm having a brilliant time. Unfortunately, I haven't caught anything, but I do have this strange feeling washing over me. It's almost like a paranoia that I can't quite describe. Now, the forests and wilderness can be a beautiful area during the day, but at night, even for an avid camper like me, it can be pretty scary. I stay still for a second, and I'm sure I can hear the same kind of voices from before. That's odd. I turn off my speaker so I can concentrate more. I know it's definitely not from what I was listening to previously, but I put my mind on fishing. I want to catch some dinner. Now as I'm fishing, I hear this strange thumping sound like someone slamming something on a tree. It's odd, it's almost like someone's taken a metal hammer to an old oak tree and is smashing it. It's in a very rhythmic manner though, stopping for a few seconds and starting again. Now, needless to say, this confuses the hell out of me, and I begin to hear more voices. I can't tell exactly what they're saying, but I decide that, you know what, I think it's better to be out in my camping site at least. That's where I have my weapons if I really need it, that I've buried now under some leaves. The thought flashed across my mind that, oh god, imagine if they found my site and my weapons, then I'd really be screwed, and I laughed to myself. So I start paddling back. As I do, I've realised that the sound has now stopped, but also that it's coming from the opposite side of the lake. I have a horrible feeling about this. I don't know of any other campers in the area, but hey, it's not the first time I've encountered anyone out there, and I make it back to the shore. As I do so, I get my stuff together, leave my raft deflated on the side, knowing I can come back for it in the morning, and I head out. As I do, the thumping starts again. This time it's louder and closer than it was before. Okay, that's really odd, and I've now picked up the pace. I'm thinking about calling out, but I realise it's not a good idea in case these are actually bad people. I glance behind me for a second, and I can just about make out the flash of a light before it cuts off the second I turn my head. Now, I don't need any more signs, and I literally start sprinting back to my campsite. As I do, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched and followed. The thudding sound slowly stops as I'm jogging, but I'm not going to wait around for it. I quickly pack up all my stuff. I decide I'm going to sleep in my car just until I figure out what's going on the next morning. I look and thankfully find my gun, exactly where I left it. I feel a lot more safe now. I start sprinting towards my car, and as I do, I can hear rustling around me. I'm now terrified. I call out, whoever's there, I have a gun and I'm not afraid to use it. What's wild is this doesn't even deter them. I start to think maybe it's a group of animals stalking me like coyotes or something. The last thing I need. As I'm running, I can see the figure of a person near my car. I shine my torch and I can see the reflection of animal eyes I don't really get a lot of time to figure out exactly what animal it is, but it gives me some relief knowing it's not a person. As I get closer, there's this disgusting smell. Just as I reach for the door, I can see that this isn't actually an animal. It's just an animal's head that's been freshly cut on the roof of my car. What the hell? I now let out a really loud scream that I don't even have to think about making. I quickly get in my car and turn on the lights. I can see the silhouette of a person in front of me now, who quickly ducks down. I instantly slam it into reverse, but I realise I'm having a really bad panic attack, and I need to wait at least 3 seconds or so before I start driving, before it gets any worse. Just as I'm doing so, I can see the flashes of more torches behind me. I instantly snap out of it, and immediately step on the accelerator and speed the hell out of there. I then instantly call the police to report what's happened. I can't believe that this actually happened to me. How could a nice relaxing getaway turn into this? How the hell did that animal head get there? Who were them people? The police agreed to meet me further up the road, and I agreed to help go back to figure out exactly what's happened. I'm literally shaking, but I feel a lot safer with the police officer there. He says he's never heard of anything like it before happening. When we get there, there's no longer a feeling of being watched. Disgustingly enough, the animal head's still on the floor, close to the exit where it rolled off my car. The officer says that someone must have done this very recently because of the way it sat and the blood around it. He does a quick patrol and can't find anything in the area. I go to the lake and show him exactly where I saw the first torch. I'm now able to retrieve my raft too, but there's no signs of anyone out there. He says he's literally never seen anything like this before, and that whoever done this is long gone, and I agreed to go back to the station with him to make a bigger report. Turns out, there's lots of reports of occultist activity in the area that neither me or the officer knew about previously. Apparently they make regular animal sacrifices, and worse, they attempt to kidnap people, and have done so before. Unfortunately for me, they never found exactly who did this, and I still have more questions than answers, and I never went back to that same area again. We live in Oregon, and we drove down to the coast of Northern California. We had a late start leaving our houses, and arrived at a little beach south of the Redwoods just after 9 PM. It's pouring rain and dark out, so we park on a dirt road that had access to the beach, and decided against walking down on the sand to set up my camp. My friend drives an old Toyota pickup with a camper shell covering the bed, which has a mattress in the back, so we decide just to sleep on here. The beach area where we were is very secluded, and belonging to a local Native American tribe. They didn't mind us visiting, as long as we're respectful. After talking for a while in the shelter of the truck canopy, my friend fell asleep before drifting off myself. I realised I had forgotten the passenger lock of the truck. All of our valuables were stored in the cab, so I hoped nobody would come along to rob us in our sleep. After a few dreamless hours, I heard the sound of the driver's side door handle of my friend's truck being lifted. That door happened to be locked, but I was awake, terrified that whoever had tried to open the door would now go around to unlock the side, or try to get in bed where we are. It was still dark out at this time, but I heard footsteps starting to walk around to the back. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it through the back window of the camper shell, in hopes of alerting the intruder that there's people here. I heard footsteps get a little further away. Then I heard the sounds of snapping twigs and something heavy being thrown. Then the man let out a long, yell, screaming a swear word at the top of his lungs. It didn't take more than 2 or 3 yells before I woke up my friend. "Dude, there's a crazy guy outside. He tried getting in the truck. Now he's walking around yelling," I blurt out as I shook his shoulder. We sat upright, peering out of the windows, but it's still pitch black out. I check my phone and it's 5 a.m. The sound of the man walking around the woods near the truck don't let up. He's still screaming now, and it seems to be getting louder. He would occasionally yell further away, but then appear closer. We sat huddled in fear for a good hour, unsure of what to do. His shout sounded as though he was full of rage, but he never attempted to get into the truck again. Eventually, the owners of the only other car parked there come to their vehicle and drove off as the sky started to lighten. We did not hear any more yelling or log frying after that, and eventually we're both able to sleep for a bit, waking up at around 10 a.m. It's hard to believe that during that terrifying hour we heard what we did, and it was so vivid. We still had no idea what the man was doing or why he was so angry, but the guy screaming profanities still remains a mystery to me. Last summer, a good friend and I embarked on a backpacking trip through the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. As fairly experienced day hikers, we felt comfortable in the Whites with our inaugural overnight trip. While planning, my buddy Ellis figured we could hike to a backcountry campsite to make our first wilderness night a little more fun. I wasn't going to disagree. Beautiful views, historic trails, and protected night in the Dry River wilderness. I was stoked, to say the least. Before any hiking trip I do, a little internet search on the trails or shelters I'll be coming across. Throughout the mid-1900s, there were a series of these lean-to ups, and down the Dry River wilderness meant for backpackers or through hikers really looking to escape the crowds in more populated areas of the forest. Though as time went on, the Forest Service had other more pressing matters. Many of these shelters were dismantled, except Dry River Shelter 3, the last remaining shelter in the wilderness. On the morning of our hike, I met Ellis at the trail at the head and we set off. The sky was overcast, bringing with it a dense fog through the trees. The weather left us with nearly no visibility, so there went our stunning views. At least the trail consisted of prime, technical New England rock, scrambling alongside the river. Ellis and I made it up the Presidential Ridge, stopping by the lakes of clouds. The hut was filled with day hikers, backpackers, and through hikers all socializing together. We were even more rewarded with some sun and a brief glimpse of the Dry River Valley on the summit of Mount Monroe, before the fog rolled back in. With dwindling views and a stiff wind, Ellis and I hustled below tree line, down to the river Shelter 3, our home for the night. Once we dropped off the ridge into the valley, we entered the wilderness zone where the rangers patrolled sparingly. Time to really be alone in the wild. As we trek into the wilderness, all signs of civilization disappeared and the trail was densely overgrown. Although it had been raining all week, there were no footprints in the mud either. At least we'd have some relaxing isolation, I guess. After about an hour or so of descending, Ellis spotted the lean-to just as our legs were asking for relief. I look up and there's this gorgeous old timber structure with a well-used fire pit alongside a cold mountain river. Pristine camping. As we settled in and explored the site, I found a small, bound notebook nestled into the corner of the structure. On the cover someone wrote, Dry River Shelter number 3. Out of curiosity, I open it, but found nothing more than a lone man's name scribbled onto the first page and a date. Just your standard log camping log. Oddly though, the man signed the book the previous day. We saw no footprints or signs of human life or animal disturbances on the trail here at the shelter. Rain can wash away tracks, but not all signs of animal life. Something felt off to me. I showed it to Ellis, who found it curious but nothing more than the sign of a single man. He convinced me that he's probably a hiking veteran and a professional at LNT. I bought into Ellis's thoughts on the situation and my mind eases now. At the sunset, we started a roaring fire alongside the riverbank. Ellis commented on how quiet the location was, having not seen another soul beyond the chirp of birds since leaving Crawford Path. The silence is eerie, but we figure that it's just civilization that's desensitized us to the wild that we're actually in now. The sun was setting, and we grew tired with darkness. Ellis took the lean-to, and I spent the night in my tent. Sleep came quickly after hiking 8 miles with 20 pounds on my back, but it doesn't last long. A brutally sharp snapping noise awoke in me. The only thing I could compare it to would be a 2x4 smashing into a tree. I think, oh god, a bear's come to search our food, and that's 50 yards away. But nothing out of the ordinary for New Hampshire. Sleep took over once again, and I remembered waking up to the sun rising over the peaks. How can you sleep with a bear there? I stumbled out of my tent to see Ellis also waking up slowly. As we made our morning oats and coffee, I wander around the site again to see if I can find the marks the bears left. Instead, I noticed something odd. The small notebook is open. I swear I put it back where I found it. Closed and in the back corner of the shelter, not open on the floor. Hey, Ellis. Were you checking out this camp log last night? Nah, I passed out, man. It's not like there's anything to read anyway. He responded. You sure? I comment as I bend over to pick it up. The lone hiker's name was not so lonely now. At least 20 more names have filled the pages. The lone traveller, whose name was originally on the first page, could now be found several pages deep into the notebook. I toss it to Ellis, whose face instantly dropped when he sees all of the names on it. Great. Now I know it's not just dehydration or delusion from the previous day. Dude, we must have seen that thing last night. There's no freaking way we missed all these names. How could we? This is when I began to tell Ellis about the snapping noise during the night. I received nothing other than instant denial. These sounds were not the results of some hooligans or backward crazies following us. Ellis was convinced. It wasn't a bear either. Ellis led us out of the site and we instantly made our way back. A year has passed since then, and I'm still not quite sure what happened on our night at the Dry River Shelter 3. The memory of seeing a single name written on the front page is so clear in my mind now, I could not have mistaken it in. Could I have made the noises? Obviously not. I was asleep and they're further away. Ellis was asleep too. I would have seen him. I don't like to think it was paranormal, but it really begs the question. All logical explanations have went out the window. And of course a bear didn't write in there. It just terrifies me thinking of it now. I'm a 17-year-old high school guy with a weak body. I live in a small town in the Philadelphians, and this town is surrounded by rice fields, with a highway going straight across it. Part of my usual weekend routine is to go jogging early in the morning. This is at some time around 5 AM. My usual jogging route is from my house, somewhere in the middle of town, to a small hill with a wonderful view of town in the morning. To reach my destination, I would have to jog on the side of the highway. From time to time, fog would appear on the highway, and once you're inside, you can only see 10 or 15 feet before it all goes white. So one Saturday, I decide to jog. I invite one of my friends, the same age as me, to join me, since he follows the same route anyway. We left home at 5 AM, proceed to the highway. As usual, a thick fog blanketed the highway. The cars that would pass by had their lights on, and there were several one-ways because of road repairs. As we enter the fog, we decide to jog along the side of the road, past a couple of roadworks, about 100 meters along each. Now all's well at this point. We're a bit exhausted, but otherwise fine. We barely encountered anyone else, and usually they're just fellow joggers. Then we come across another roadwork, and we saw this guy crouched down on the asphalt. He was wearing a dirty orange vest, and he had a similarly dirty hard hat on. We can't really see his face, but decide just to ignore it. He looks as though he's fidgeting with something in his hands, so we thought he was just holding a few tools or something. Also, there was no one there but us, me, my friend and that guy. The fog's thick as hell. My friend signalled to me to keep a distance from the guy, and I followed him. When we get closer, we can hear him humming a strange tune under his breath, which in of itself isn't that weird, but boy, we were wrong. As we get closer, he starts acting erratically. He stopped for a moment as I passed him, then starts laughing. It wasn't a regular laugh. It sounded sinister and a little dry. It was really loud, so it began to freak me out. We didn't increase our speed at this point, as we think he's messing with us. But he doesn't stop. He just kept laughing and laughing, and we knew it was beyond a prank. I can't describe his laugh more than I just didn't trust it. We didn't look back. We were speeding up now, as we were starting to see the hill. I was gasping for air, but somehow I didn't let that stop me. I forced myself on, and my friend was doing the same. He was probably 50 meters behind us when I looked at him. He had stopped laughing, but now he was standing straight and staring at us. He called out to us in my language in an arranged tone. That's when adrenaline kicked in. I just ran and ran until we reached the hill. In hindsight, I don't know how I was able to push myself for so long. When we finally arrive at the top, we're exhausted and nearly collapse on a cement bench and stay there for over an hour. Like a breath of fresh air, my friend laughs in a comedic manner. We then walk towards home. I haven't ate yet, I was so hungry, and as we passed the road we saw the guy in. He's no longer there. The only people there are wearing construction outfits that are working on the traffic signals, but nowhere near the man. As I got home, I told my parents about it, and they said it's probably a nut job looking for someone to rob, who's probably stole the outfit, and I never went jogging again in the fog after that. This happened a few years ago when I was mountain walking. We started as a large group, but after some time of everyone choosing their own pace, I ended up walking alone. I was walking downhill through a thick forest area when I slipped on an unsteppable part of the trail, falling fully. It hurt quite a lot. Before I could get up, I see a deer walking out of the trees to my left, standing in front of me. This is not natural, because deers usually avoid human contact. Something was really off about this deer. I didn't know what. Its eyes appeared lifeless, filled with uneasiness. Then it opened its mouth to show multiple rows of what appeared to be razor-sharp teeth, and let out an ear-shattering scream. It sounded like nothing I ever heard before. It shouldn't exist. I watch quite a lot of horror movies, and yet none have come close to the scream of this. It was so demonic. After that scream, it closed its jaws and walked away to the side of the woods. Now, I've never told this story to anyone else before, but I'm sure what I saw was a Wendigo. It just horrifies me knowing that I saw this thing. For a second when it happened, I thought maybe I've hit my head, but I had no head injuries whatsoever, and I knew exactly how I landed. It almost put me off running in the woods entirely. When I was young, I worked as a backpacking guide in Western NC. My schedule dictated a full 8-day shift with 6 days off. During those 6 days, to myself, my other co-workers and me would play in the woods. In the summer, you can't beat a mountain swimming hole. One of our favourite activities was called Paradise Falls, alternatively called Wolf Creek Falls. This is a cliff jumping spot with a huge swimming area, a tiny slot canyon and an inner pool. Most will venture just to do the small jump, even though it's the smallest and arguably least accessible. Even though the jump is almost 9 foot at most, you must do 10 minutes rock scaling to get there. We are all adventuring in and out from inside this tiny canyon, and you can't see the main pool. Well, we got to the jump and coaxed the first person off, a fellow guide who had never been to the spot before. She jumped successfully and swam into the main pool and beach area. Then she screamed. Because she was now out of sight, myself and another guide jumped in together and swam the short distance to her, with the others in tow. Of course we figured she was injured somehow. She was treading water and just staring wide-eyed at the riverbank. When I looked to the shore, there stood a man. He's massive, easily 6'7", and appears to have no hair on him, wearing beat-up overalls. Perhaps the most disturbing is that he had folds of skin all over his body. Imagine the Michelin Man, but this is on his face, arms and chest, everywhere with these weird layers. He's also armed with a shotgun, staring intently at us. He just stood there and watched as we grab anything important and speed out of there. He walked slowly back into the forest, and we never saw him again. Around 8 to 10 years ago, I was at a lake way out in the woods on some land that my dad owned. I was alone aside from my dog, a terrier. I had only been fishing on the little pier in the southeast corner for about 10 minutes when I get an almost overwhelming feeling of being in danger, and then notice something or someone watching me from the tree line on the opposite side of the lake. I was a kid, but somehow keep composure. For some reason, I felt it important that whatever it was did not know I was aware of them. Anyway, it started moving slowly from tree to tree, near taking its eye off me, but never truly facing away from me. The lake's about 70 yards wide, so I can't really see details, but I know where they're facing. After realizing that it was following me, I pull my pole down and walk down the pier and up the bank towards the trail back of our cabin, which is about 1/4 of a mile away. Once I hit the tree line, I bolted to the cabin and waited there with one of my dad's guns until my parents got home. The only witness I had was my dog, and he saw it as well. I know because when he saw the figure, he instantly starts growling in a low tone until I make him stop. I have no idea who or what it could have been or what the intentions are, but they're most certainly not good. This took place in southeast Mississippi near the Alabama border back in the 90s. We didn't live there, but we spent most weekends up there. I know it couldn't have been a normal person, because our nearest neighbour was a very old couple who literally lived miles away. Aside from the lake area that our cabin's on, the surroundings very thick forest. The figure was extremely tall as well. I have a very good memory, especially for details. Also, shortly before I noticed it, I got a very strong feeling that I was being watched. I never felt safe there again, and I was so glad my dad sold it. This incident happened to me when I was younger, probably around 19 or 20. I used to drive around the countryside in the woods for hours on end, up to literally 6 hours, smoke cigarettes while I listened to music daydreaming. I've been through a lot, so this is a nice way for me to let off steam and digest all the badness that happened to me in the past few years. There is a route that goes into the southern part of my state and eventually takes you to Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. If you keep going all the way, it will eventually take you to Florida. It was a road I found to be very fond as it intersected with a lot of interesting places. It could take you to cities and beaches alike, all the while somehow remaining isolated and rural. On one of those day trips, I was driving through a heavily wooded area that opens up into a field lined with trees on my left. I was pretty zoned out at this point, but something on the side of the road immediately caught my attention. In fact, it even seemed that time slowed, or I could see this apparition more vividly than any other thing I've ever seen in my life. What I saw was an older, balding man dressed in a full Catholic priest garb. His mouth is open, appearing to be in grief, screaming at the sky. He was standing in front of a dead deer, a buck. From what I recall, it was around 3 points, maybe 4. Behind the deer was a 1970s Crown Vic style police car with its lights on. It had no markings on it whatsoever to signify what country it's from. And no one's in the vehicle. I don't even think it had an engine running sound. It appeared as though the vehicle had been parked there all day. The other odd thing about this vehicle is that it has no damage on the front end to show that it's responsible for hitting the deer, nor was there any blood or anything. The deer seems fine. Taking a step back, trying to think of what I saw, it had the appearance of being staged or set up somehow, as if it was a prop for a movie. Everything was just so odd. For the speed I was travelling at, the glance I cast on this spectacle was only 4 seconds, but it's so abruptly singed into my mind now. I have never seen anything like it. For some reason I started crying after seeing it. Did the forces that shape time or something just merge and I saw something from back then? I don't know, I've even been on the same spot from this trip, and there's never a trace of it, not even the body of the deer or tyre tracks from the police car that could be seen. Like a breeze, it was gone. A thing so out of place it could not have been from its surroundings. I have no answers to any of these questions. Only a lack of closure for something that's scarring my brain.